Jeff Hamilton joining us now from the Winnipeg Free Press. Jeff, how's it going, man?
Oh, things are great, man. It's a pleasure to be on talking football. Any opportunity to talk football, whether it be the CFL or XFL, or in this case, both, is awesome. So great to be here.
When we announced you were going to come on, one of our guests, listeners said, "Oh, Jeff's going to be so insightful," and he meant bringing wisdom, I think. And I said, "Well, he spelled it insightful, as in bringing anger and rage." And I go, "Well, that would be far more like Arash Madani coming on, and hopefully you would bring a little bit more." Paul and I, we have a lot of different takeaways today with, all the team owners tweeting, all the health stuff, the different provinces. Where do you start today? What is top of your mind with things that we should be talking about in terms of CFL?
See, right now, I think we're almost kind of in that wait and see period, right? Because I mean, the new schedule, as you guys know and I've talked about for weeks, being August 5th, the expectation to start that date. Will we start that date? Won't we start that date? The reality is we've kind of been in a bit of a holding pattern and waiting on COVID-19 and where the numbers are, not just in number of cases in the various provinces, but also the vaccination rates. And then you look at the age groups that are getting vaccinated, and those numbers are refreshing. But I think the real date we're looking for now, guys, is mid-June, because you can't just kind of say you're going to play on August 5th and not make a definitive statement. A decision needs to be made in the next few weeks here. And I'd say by latest June, you need to make a decision if this is going to be possible. So in either, mid-June, it's either going to be, okay, the plan is a go. We're going to start August 5th. This is when we're going to have the players in, yada, 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 more of those details, or another announcement saying, look, the COVID numbers aren't working. Vaccination isn't where we expected it to be at this point. We're going to have to push back. And then at that point, I think you really need to nail down a date and stick to it. Because, if you're going any further past, Labor Day weekend, which is a big weekend in the CFL in September. So that would be not an ideal time to start, but it would also be an ideal time to start, all things considering. So that's the kind of what we're waiting for is really the COVID numbers and ultimately an announcement to be made in mid-June about the future of the 2021 season.
With the news this week, Arash had this article with 3 down. You had with the Tiger Cats and the Red Blacks, everybody, Rough Riders tweeting. The big thesis of our episode today is kind of like this silence, right? And we're the same way with XFL fans. Do you think the CFL should be saying more and doing more now, besides letting kind of these team owners run amok, for lack of a better word?
Yeah. So loaded. Transparency, right? I mean, that's been a topic that you guys have been hammering on for a while. It's something that I certainly think needs to be improved by this league. And the reality is we're in year 2, right? So this whole process from last year was kind of this wait and see, right? So the leash, I think, for fans is getting shorter and shorter, right? It was a year ago that it was okay, we're going to wait. We're not, the CFL was kind of viewed early on as being kind of the league that was in the best situation, because unlike the NHL, the NBA, they weren't playing. So they didn't have to go through this massive stop. It was, no one really knew what this, COVID-19 would evolve to, or maybe we did, but we maybe weren't really buying it or expecting it to be that great in 2020, right? To be this issue. But ultimately it became the worst situation for them, because now they're waiting. And then, so we went through this whole process of okay, yep, it's not going to start on time. Then it was a new proposed date, and then it was silence, and then it was another proposed date, and then it was this big adventure to create this bubble here in Winnipeg for what would have been a 6-game season, and ultimately that didn't work out. And in between all of that was the work with the government and the lack of communication with players, and there was that fight. So everyone was kind of had that as a backdrop. And then when they ultimately canceled the season, it was okay, maybe, some people even came out, I'm not saying pundits, but fans for sure came out and said, well, yeah, maybe it was actually a great thing that the CFL didn't play. They would have been screwed and yada, yada, but, gung-ho for 2021. Well, here we are. So at this point in time, I just think it's more or less I would like the league to say that this is our plan. This is our backup plan. These are our contingency plans, so that people can start planning, not just people, but players and everyone involved in the CFL can get a better idea of how to plan the future. Now, when your future is based on a ever-evolving pandemic, you can't be as clear and concise. But when you have guys like Bob Young, who's the owner of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, saying we will be playing this year, and you have people in Montreal ownership who as you guys know are new, kind of just bought the team at the worst possible time at the end of 2019. They're saying they're going to play that. Not money isn't an issue, but ultimately money is not the problem here. We are going to put a product on. You set an expectation that things are going to happen. So to me, I don't even know if it's a guarantee that they're going to play this year, let alone when they're going to play. So I think, as far as should they be more open, I think there's certainly an argument to the transparency, but this has been an issue. Transparency has been an issue with this league for a long time. And it's been not only an issue in the lack of transparency, but it contradicts directly of what they claim to be. And that's the most accessible league in pro sports, right? Most accessible to players, most accessible to their product. You're part of this. We need you and kind of thing. And obviously every professional league needs fans. They need that support. But the CFL tries to kind of put their arm around you and say, come on in and be part of this. Well, when crap hits the fan, you kind of hope that you're part of that, right? And I go back to my earlier comments, you understood that they couldn't play in 2020. You got to a point where you're no longer angry with the league for kind of dragging this along. And now, fast forward a year and we're kind of seeing this movie play out again. And then you throw the XFL on top of it and tensions are high, right? Tensions are at an all-time high because nobody has the answer. So, and including the CFL, the thing is they have a schedule in front of them right now. They know what it looks like at the moment. They just aren't sharing it with fans because I think they're trying to balance that line of being straight up, but also being realistic. And unfortunately for them, I don't think they're playing that dance very well, or at least they could be playing it a lot better.
I mean, if the CFL doesn't play this season, what does that mean for the CFL?
See, I think there's lots of thoughts to that. I think there's a lot of people, obviously, that would say the CFL's doomed if they don't play for a second year in a row. And I think out of sight, out of mind is a very powerful thing in pro sports. I don't think it maybe even unheard of in pro sports. But I think there's obviously truth to that. I mean, I think if you have fair weather fans, you're going to lose those fans or a good chunk of those fans. I think you're going to lose any momentum. If you look at particular teams, I mean, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers snapped a 29-year curse. They won the Grey Cup. They would have loved to reap the benefits of that next year or that momentum coming in. So, I think there certainly is a problem. I don't even love the September start. I don't love the August start, right? Because we already wiped out an entire season. Now it's kind of the late stages of the year. So you're already kind of in a position, not a great position. So at this point, I mean, the CFL's been through so much, and they've been through not something obviously like this, but I do think they'll survive if they don't play another year. And in fact, but I think you look back at things, and even if you go to last year, I was of the mind that they should have shut the lights out early, right? When you start seeing teams losing $7 million, the Bombers lost 10, but it was actually 7 with the government subsidies that they had, or they took advantage of. So to me, a lot of that's salaries, like employee salaries, some player bonuses and stuff like that, and having these coaches stay on, there's somehow an unlimited amount of opportunity for professional coaches out there, and if they don't get a job if they don't get paid their $500,000 in some cases, that they're going to go somewhere else is kind of ludicrous. So I feel like they made their bed in a lot of ways by not shutting down, realizing, and this is an ego thing, guys, it's a pride thing, is that you're trying to be big time football, but you run it like a mom and pop shop. So it's that goes to the contradiction of things, where it's if you actually wanted your league to survive or the teams to not post these massive losses, you'd shut her down immediately and realize that you're never going to get up from this, and that you're not in a financial position, not just in your business model, but even though you have billion-dollar owners in some cases, a willingness to put that money forward. So acknowledging that, especially for the community teams, guys, the Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan, they would have benefited from shutting the lights off immediately. The fact that they're posting anywhere between $7 and $10 million losses, I'm not going to say it's unforgivable, but it's just kind of, you look back on it and you go, wow, that money could have been really useful. And where exactly did it go? So I don't even know what the question is at this point, but in this rant, but at the same time, I feel like this is the year where, you've now kind of, I don't want to say painted yourself into a corner, But now you're telling everybody you're going to play this year, and you know you're going to take massive losses. It just feels like if you put things into a 2-year window, just can't help but to think that some of these damages were self-inflicted.
No, and you're good. Like, where do we start? I don't know. That was great. I love that. Love the passion behind that. It's just so frustrating to me. And Paul and I were talking about this before we got on about the whole crypto thing right now, and Elon and Twitter, and it's so easy nowadays to control a narrative on social media, and it is really easy to let it go away, right? And to me, having the CFL come out and once a week and tweet an update, it's the same thing we're dealing with the XFL, and I feel like it's this lost opportunity where, a billion little things are going on social media in between every single time that they post. And it's just getting, people are arguing with each other and all this kind of stuff. I mean, what do you wish we could be seeing right now from Ambrosie, from the rest of the management? Maybe what are some things that they could be doing better?
To me, I think, not to harp on transparency, but let's face it, guys. I don't know what you guys know about Global 2.0, this kind of expansion thing that the CFL has been all about since Randy Ambrosie took over as commissioner, and that kind of conversation was even before he was there. But that vision was built on Canada's reputation and building amongst countries around the world, not including the US. In fact, it was built on, look at the chaos that's going on in the US politically, all these things. We can identify with the world of who we want to be and bring these countries in. That was literally the sales point. Randy Ambrosie told me this a number of times in our interviews, and I don't understand why this doesn't ever get brought up. Now you're in bed with the Americans. Now the lifeline of your league is built on this partnership, alignment, whatever you want to call it, with the XFL, and it completely contradicts what you've been saying for years. Now, obviously, this is pivoting. It's a whether the XFL is a lifeline, an opportunity, whatever it may be. There are things that are broken with the CFL, and a common thing that I've used is, if you had pre-existing conditions before the pandemic hit, they just magnified. And that was the situation with the CFL. They already had issues. They were already beating their chest about being this big, glorious league, but they were losing $20 million a season. Like, there's no one in their right mind who would buy the CFL. Now, the CFL is a good product. It's a good game. It has a long history and all those things. But when the announcement came out with the XFL that we were announcing that we're having conversations with the XFL, you damn right the CFL knew what that would do. They knew that even the mention of the of U.S. expansion was going to rattle cages. Whether it's a better situation now, which obviously you can make that argument, than it was decades ago when they went down, and that was just a completely. You wish there was social media back then, because you'd get a little bit more of the information behind the scenes, and thank God there wasn't. But the situation now is very not simple, but it's they've now announced that they're having conversation, and you wouldn't do that unless you were far down the line. And as we know, they've been having these conversations for months. So this is just a roundabout way of saying, well, where is this headed, right? Where are we going with this? You've now pulled the rabbit out of the hat, exposed it to everybody, and now you just think it's just going to just sit there and no one's going to ask about it. No one's going to wonder what the next step is. I mean, once you bring that into play, everyone wants to know, are the rules going to stay? Are the teams going to stay? What does it look like as far as the Grey Cup obviously being a massive piece of this puzzle? Like all these traditions are now are in danger, or at the very least are in question, and fans are like, well, what? And then the CFL is like, whoa, we're just having conversations. Well, no, you're not just having conversations. You're slowly pulling the Band-Aid off, and in the meantime, you're alienating your fans and also leaving them in the dark. So to me, it's just one of those things where you can kind of explain what's happening. I know it's difficult, especially as you try to have a traditional CFL season this year, because obviously this is in the future. But obviously those conversations have gotten to a point where maybe there isn't definitive rule changes, but we're not here testing the waters anymore, guys. I mean, this is happening. This is the future of this league. We just don't know what it looks like. And I think, if anything, that could be painted a bit better. But the reality is the CFL will treat their fans like they don't know what's good for them, and they don't want, but they're also thinking of the bottom line. This season, they don't want to get fans. If fans are going to leave when it's confirmed that the XFL and the CFL are now a partnership, well, they'd rather those fans leave next year than this season. And I think that's why we're sitting here wondering what the heck's going on.
So why is there such a blind loyalty from CFL fans to the CFL against any type of merger? Why does that exist?
Well, why is there a blind loyalty? Like, why are most fans up in arms on why this might or will happen? I think it's just that. I think a lot of people, we also live in this world where we think like Twitter is kind of the universe, and that the dominating opinion on social media is somehow the prevailing opinion within our communities. And I don't think that's the case, especially in the CFL, where there's an older fan base. Now, I'm not trying to, say there isn't a young fans that are interested, but a predominant fan base for the Canadian Football League is older people, and most older people are not on social media per se. Obviously, some are, but I think there's a lot of conversations happening in people's living rooms where it's like they've already ruled out the CFL, or they're not happy with the CFL. And I think it's one of those things where it's part history, right? Like, it's part thinking like, this is our game, guys. I mean, this has been one of those things where it's the t-shirts have been made. The slogans have been abused for years and years and years. It's not like someone came out and was like, ooh, the big bad NFL. And then here's the CFL. This is our game. Like, for a long time, it's not the case anymore. Like, our balls are bigger. Our field is bigger. Like, there was an identity to it. So once you start talking about incorporating a completely different entity that threatens to change that identity, to change those traditions, and not to have any kind of understanding as to what, because like those people on social media also aren't getting the information that some people are getting too. So they're kind of sitting there having conversations with their friends that are probably a bit uneducated and fueled with the belief that, okay, this is just the beginning of the end, and not maybe seeing some of the broader concerns, issues within the CFL, and certainly some of the positives that could come out of joining a leadership group, such as the XFL.
What do you, as someone that covers the league, as a fan that lives, what do you want to see come from this?
You know what, I know, because I watched like 4 or 5 of your podcasts, and I knew this question was coming. So, to me, it was like early on, I immediately thought, wow, The Rock is on a press release attached to the CFL, and I called his camp and I said, hey, my deadline's not for like 2 months. So just to leave that window open in case The Rock wanted to call me. I haven't got that call, and I'm not sure if the 2 months is up yet, but we'll see. But I thought, immediately I thought, okay, this is interesting for sure. As I mentioned before, just given the whole global expansion plan. But I originally thought, okay, this is The Rock. This is Danny Garcia, who has a lot of obviously experience in building brands. You have Redbird Capital, who has money and now an interest in expanding their sports portfolio and all those things. And the one thing that the CFL has had issues with is being cool. I mean, people don't wear CFL caps and not even know CFL. Like, they don't have that brand, right? They don't have things that like people want to jump at. In fact, it's the opposite. They've struggled to be cool. They've struggled to get a younger audience. They've struggled at all these things that you look at the personnel behind the XFL and you go, wow, those are all answers potentially to these massive problems and these massive issues that the CFL has in growing the game and growing their product. So that was kind of my first little bit. Then I started kind of thinking like, not that I was against it. I didn't flip-flop, but it's just the way in which things are happening, right? To me, what kind of bothers me is that the CFL Board of Governors is an old, tired group. Like they are. The leadership, they don't have creative ideas. They sit in a room. I'm not going to say they just yell at each other, but they all have their own agendas. For a long time, some teams got this, some teams got that. Like the Hamilton Tiger Cats didn't even have a website that matched the rest of the league for years, because Bob Young owns a computer software company. So he was allowed to do this. Other deals have been made in the past, whether it be for merchandise and stuff. So everyone, and then there's the community-owned team that's like, okay, sit down and shut up because we're the ones digging our hands into our pockets to pay money. So there was this like weird kind of dynamic, and I think they just got in their own way. Now, that that isn't a, that's a very, very shrunk down, simplified version. But there's things that I see at the CFL that I, like if they're, whether it's their producing of content, like traveling to find players out, like this one summer, they like traveled like the globe and watch players work out. Like that's a waste of money. Like you don't need that. No one cares about that. When guys aren't staying on teams for longer than a couple of years, like no one needs to do that. Like, so there's a lot of decisions I've questioned, but at the end of it, I just find that like these guys haven't figured out a way to grow the game. So like to me, I know that there is advantages to joining the XFL. I know there are disadvantages to the CFL and losing that kind of product or that identity that you've had that you built over decades. So I understand that stuff. I don't know where I fall. And I kind of use Dan Barnes's comment that you guys had I don't have any stake in the game, but I do understand the frustration from Canadian fans that know that it's a handful of people making these decisions for them, that are telling them this is for the good of you, when in fact they're just focused on the bottom line. Now this is a business. So MLSE, the relationship with Montreal, the way things work in that regard. So it's like they're making the decision not based on what's good for the Canadian game. They're making a decision what's good for the future of this league. And I don't know if those things are being communicated as well, and therefore aren't being aligned with the hardcore fans that you ultimately need on your side, regardless of what happens in the future.
Totally makes sense. Jeff Hamilton, Winnipeg Free Press. Want to thank you for coming on and talking with us today about CFL, XFL stuff, and a little bit about the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun, guys. It's great.
We really appreciate you taking the time out, working and getting all these people on. And so we appreciate that. And thank you so much. Well, I like the passion. I will say that. So
we could have gone into so much too. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's great to talk football. It's great to talk with guys like yourselves who, obviously dedicate the time and energy into this and who knows what the future holds. Because at the end of the day, like, I think I'm with a lot of people where we just want to see football be played again and fans attending these games and really get things going. So, whatever happens in the future here, I'll be reporting it and covering it, and as will you. And, I'm sure our paths will cross in the future.
We'll definitely
if we do have a Grey Cup this year, are you going to head to the Grey Cup this year?
Every year, man. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know you guys have confirmed and committed to that too. I'll just add that it is a great week, great people. It doesn't matter. It's the opposite of the Super Bowl, right? It's I'm not going to say the game means nothing, obviously, for those fans whose teams are in it, but it really is about the week leading up to it, and then the game's the game. Whereas obviously in the Super Bowl, it's kind of the opposite. So definitely worth going, guys, for sure.
I'm a wedding videographer, so that's my option. I might just take residency up there for the whole month of December, and we'll party.
What's the deal? I'm sure there's lots of people looking to get their weddings done and double booked and all that other stuff. So who knows? Put it out there and maybe you can double dip while you're down.
Really appreciate you coming. We'll definitely have you back. This was great.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.